d4, Hungarian Grandmaster Laszlo Szabó opens with the queen's pawn, seeking a strategic, positional battle. This move asserts immediate control over the center and prepares for a complex, nuanced struggle against the young American prodigy. 1. F6, Bobby Fischer responds with his trademark flexibility, developing a knight and keeping his options open for one of the many Indian defenses. He signals his intent to create an imbalanced and dynamic game from the outset. 2. C4, Szabó increases the pressure on the center, challenging Black's control of the d5 square. This classic move prepares to develop the queenside and sets the stage for a battle over central dominance. 2. G6, Fischer commits to his beloved king's Indian defense, preparing to fianchetto his dark-squared bishop. This plan involves ceding central space temporarily in exchange for long-term dynamic counterattacking chances against the white center. 3. NC3, the knight develops to its most logical square, reinforcing white's central grip and preparing to contest key squares. Szabó continues with a standard and powerful setup against the king's Indian, entering the main theoretical battlegrounds. 3. BG7, the powerful king's Indian bishop emerges on G7, its iconic post. From here, it will slice across the long diagonal, becoming a pivotal piece for both the defense of the king and the launch of future attacks. For E4, Szabó establishes the classical pawn center, seizing a significant space advantage. This ambitious formation is the main challenge to the king's Indian, aiming to restrict Black's pieces and build a crushing attack. For O, Fischer quickly castles his king, removing it from the center and preparing to unleash his counterattack. This is an essential step before Black begins to challenge White's imposing, yet potentially overextended, pawn structure. 5. BG5, Szabó chooses a sharp and somewhat provocative sideline, the Averbach system. This move pins the f6 knight, putting immediate pressure on Black's position and aiming to disrupt his typical plans of kingside expansion. 5. D6, Fischer calmly reinforces his center, preparing to break the pin and solidifying his pawn structure. He is unfazed by White's aggressive setup and continues with his solid and principled development plan. 6. QD2, the queen develops to D2, a multi-purpose move that supports the center, prepares for queenside castling, and adds more firepower behind a potential kingside attack. Szabó is preparing for a sharp, double-edged fight. 6. C5, Fischer initiates the thematic king's Indian counterattack against White's center. This pawn thrust challenges White's d4 pawn and seeks to open lines on the queenside for his pieces, starting the strategic battle in earnest. 7. D5, Szabó pushes his pawn forward, closing the center and creating a locked pawn structure. The game now becomes a race. White will aim to generate a decisive attack on the kingside, while Black will seek counterplay on the queenside. 7. E6, Fischer immediately challenges the base of White's pawn chain. This move aims to undermine the d5 pawn and open the e-file for his rooks, creating new weaknesses in the white position that he can exploit. 8. BD3, Szabó develops his bishop to an active square, preparing to castle and solidify his control over the kingside. He continues with his plan, seemingly ignoring the central tension that Fischer is methodically creating. 8. EXD5, Fischer resolves the central tension on his own terms. This exchange opens the e-file and clarifies the strategic plans for both sides, leading to a more open and tactical phase of the game. 9. NXD5, an aggressive recapture. Szabó brings his knight to a powerful central outpost where it eyes key squares in Black's camp. This is a more ambitious choice than recapturing with the pawn, seeking immediate tactical possibilities. 9. B6, Fischer immediately develops his bishop to challenge the powerful white knight on d5. He is not willing to allow this piece to dominate the center and forces an immediate confrontation to neutralize the threat. 10. N2, a flexible knight retreat. Szabó repositions his knight, preparing to recapture on d5 with a piece while also keeping an eye on the kingside. This move maintains the tension and keeps White's options open for the future. 10. BXD5, Fischer carries out his plan, trading his active bishop for the dangerous white knight. This exchange clarifies the pawn structure and gives Black a clear long-term target, the potentially weak white pawn on d5. 11. EXD5, Szabó is forced to recapture with the pawn, creating an isolated passed pawn on d5. While this pawn can be a strength, it is also a permanent weakness that black will now seek to blockade and attack. 11. NBD7, Fischer continues his development with a flexible knight move. The knight supports the center, prepares to jump to a more active square, and aids in the strategic blockade of the white d-pawn. 12. Sabo finally castles his king to safety, connecting his rooks and completing his initial development. He is now ready to focus his attention on generating a kingside attack, the main goal of his strategy. 12. n5, Fischer's knight leaps to a magnificent outpost on e5. From this dominant square, it puts pressure on white's entire position, restricting his pieces and preparing to join a future attack against the white king. 13. h4, Sabo lashes out on the kingside with this aggressive pawn thrust. He aims to dislodge the powerful black knight and open lines for an attack against the black king, a typical plan in this structure. 13. nxd3, Fischer willingly trades his powerful knight, knowing that the resulting position favors him. He eliminates a key white defender and further clarifies the strategic landscape to his advantage, simplifying into a better position. 14. qxd3, Sabo recaptures with the queen, which now becomes a more active piece. However, the absence of his light-squared bishop will soon be felt, especially on the weak and dark squares around his king. 14. h6, a very useful pawn move. Fischer forces the white bishop to declare its intentions and creates some breathing room for his king. This subtle move improves black's position while asking a question of white. 15. bh4, the bishop is forced to retreat, but it maintains the pin on the f6 knight. Sabo is still hoping to generate threats on the kingside, but his attacking potential is slowly dwindling under Fischer's precise play. 15. re8, the rook joins the party. Fischer brings his rook to the open e-file, placing more pressure on white's central pawns and preparing to join the attack. Every move by Fischer increases the pressure on Sabo's position. 16. re1, Sabo brings his own rook to the e-file, challenging black's control and reinforcing his central defenses. The battle for the open file is now a key element of the game, with both sides vying for supremacy. 16. qb6, a brilliant change of front. Fischer shifts his attack to the queenside, targeting the weak b2 pawn. This powerful move forces white to divert his attention from the kingside and respond to a new, more dangerous threat. 17. bxf6, Sabo trades his bishop for the knight, hoping to create some weaknesses in black's pawn structure. However, this trade gives up the bishop pair and activates black's own powerful light-squared bishop. 17. bxf6, Fischer recaptures, and his bishop is now a monster on the long diagonal, eyeing the white king. The trade has clearly favored black, whose pieces are now perfectly coordinated for a decisive attack. 18. f5, a desperate attack. Sabo pushes forward with a desperate kingside attack, trying to create counterplay before black's queenside initiative becomes decisive. This is his last real chance to create problems for Fischer. 18. g5, the door is slammed shut. A brilliant defensive move that completely shuts down white's attack. This pawn block entombs white's f-pawn and leaves his own king far more exposed than black's. 19. b3, a necessary but passive move. Sabo is forced to defend his queenside pawns against the threat of the black queen, but this only serves to create more weaknesses and gives Fischer more time to build his advantage. 19. qa5, Fischer's queen repositions to a commanding square, putting immense pressure on white's weak c4 pawn and preparing to invade the white position. The strategic victory for black is now almost complete. 20. rc1, the rook is forced into a passive defensive role, trying to hold the queenside together. White's pieces are completely tied down, and he can only wait for Fischer to deliver the final, crushing blow. 20. sa2, the harvest begins. Fischer's queen finally breaks through, capturing a key pawn and creating a deadly passed a pawn. The material is now equal, but black's positional and tactical advantage is completely overwhelming. 21. rc2, a cunning trap? Sabo makes a move that appears to trap the black queen. This is a common tactical motif, but Fischer has foreseen it and prepared a stunning and decisive refutation. 21. re3, the brilliant interference. A spectacular and decisive combination. Fischer sacrifices his rook with this incredible interference move, which deflects the white queen and allows his own queen to escape while creating unstoppable threats. 22. c3, Sabo is forced to accept the sacrifice, but his position is now completely lost. His queen is drawn away from the defense of the kingside, leaving his king fatally exposed to black's remaining pieces. 22. qxc2, the queen escapes and attacks. Fischer's queen not only escapes but also lands on a devastating attacking square, from which it threatens the white king and prepares to support the advance of the passed a pawn. 23. kh1, a feudal king move. The white king tries to hide in the corner, but there is no safety to be found. This move is a sign of complete desperation in a hopeless position, as the real threat is on the other side of the board. 24. h4, a last gasp. Sabo makes a final, desperate attempt to create some chaos, but it is far too little, too late. This move only weakens his own king position further and does nothing to stop the inevitable. 24. a4, the final nail in the coffin. The passed a pawn begins its unstoppable march to the queening square. Faced with the choice of losing his rook to stop the pawn or being checkmated, Sabo resigns. A brilliant strategic and tactical masterpiece from Fischer. 0-1 white resigns.